After laying down a clunky but promising foundation with its first UFC game in 2014, EA Vancouver has done a respectable job of iterating and improving on each new entry over the last 6 years. In keeping with that tradition, EA Sports UFC 4 focuses on making its many complex systems a little less intimidating for newcomers without ever taking away from the depth of its multi-layered combat, most notably with a new grapple assist system and a much improved career mode. Some of the larger ambitions of career mode fall a bit flat, and the ground game still feels like it could use some work, but all things considered, UFC 4 is a win for MMA fans. UFC 3 made some big power moves by dramatically revamping the entire striking system, but UFC 4 is more about finesse. It makes small but necessary adjustments like the way it tweaks the clinch game. It's now much more fluid and works more like a natural extension of the stand-up combat rather than its own separate minigame. There are no more transition denials on the feet, and all you have to do to break free is move away. With this new system, you can very organically go from strike to clinch, and from there decide whether you want to attack the head, attack the body, or push the opponent up against the cage. For some fighters, you can even go for a standing submission a la John Jones vs. Lyoto Machida.
He got it done.
Oh, he got it done, absolutely. He finishes his opponent by way of submission.
The other big change this time around is with submissions, which have actually been split into two different types of minigames, one for chokes and one for joint submissions. Both minigames are essentially a race to be the first to either fill up the submit meter or the escape meter. Erratically spinning the stick or mashing the buttons makes the defender's bar bigger, rewarding more careful and thoughtful cat-and-mouse style mind games than prior iterations. Also, you can now do a freaking Von Flue choke by countering a guillotine. I know if you don't follow MMA, you probably don't have any idea what that means, but trust me, it's awesome. And it provides a nice risk-reward balance for those attempting a submission while on their back. Finally, EA Vancouver has also introduced a grapple assist system for those who might not know their full guards from their half guards, their side controls from their full mounts, or their rubber guards from their mouth guards. When using grapple assist, instead of transitioning to specific positions while on the ground, you can just choose to transition based on what it is you want to do. It's not ideal, but for those who are just picking up UFC for the first time, it's a great shortcut to start having fun without having someone explain to them what all the different positions mean, which ones have submissions, and which ones you can get up from. Of course, you can also choose to play with a legacy control scheme or a new hybrid that combines the two, allowing you to transition to specific positions with the right stick and use the more general assist transitions with the left stick, which is a nice compromise. Outside of those big changes and a couple of small control adjustments, the gameplay in UFC 4 is largely the same as UFC 3, which for the most part is fine. That said, the ground game still feels largely unsatisfying in UFC 4. Ground and pound strikes still lack impact. The guessing game of transitions and transition denials is still incredibly unintuitive without the guide arrows, which are removed in online play regardless of whether you're playing casually or in ranked. And there's still very little in the way of feedback to let you know why you lost a position or why your opponent's transition beat out yours. There's still work to be done to get the ground game up to the level of the striking.
Hello? Anybody home? What, you daydreaming again? Number of times I've seen you looking up at this wall. I told you you'd make it to the big show. Now here we are.
UFC 4 successfully treats its career mode as an introduction to get new players very quickly up to speed with the basics. After getting your ass kicked in your very first amateur fight, you're taken under the wing of Coach Davis, a fictional former UFC fighter who walks you through an extended tutorial that crucially follows up each lesson with a fight centered around the concept you just learned. After that, it's very much like UFC 3. You get a fight offer, you choose how to spend your 100 weekly points leading up to it, and then you fight. The best new change this year is in the fighter evolution system that improves your moves the more you use them, letting you craft a fighter that truly feels unique to your style. There's a lot of stat building and decision making that takes place in between fights, but thankfully it's all time well spent, because you really do see the effects of your training paying off. It also helps that the training itself is fun, since it's mostly 2-minute sparring sessions, even if it's a little too easy to knock your training partners out cold.
Hey, it's starting to fall apart.
I'm less impressed by the emphasis on choice in the story, which feels a little half-baked. Occasionally throughout your career, you'll be given opportunities to choose how you respond to certain social media posts from fighters, or how you react to certain events like a fighter pulling out of a fight due to injury. There is a gameplay element to it all in that if you have a bad relationship with the fighter, you won't be able to invite them to your gym and learn one of their signature moves. But the trade-off is that when you potentially fight them down the line, there will be more hype to it. The problem is, none of that really made much of a difference because there are already so many other fighters to invite to your gym, and the fighters that I did start beef with early on never resurfaced once I started climbing the ranks. A big historical problem for the UFC series has been the unpredictable difficulty spikes once you get into title contention, which is thankfully not an issue in UFC 4. The difficulty remains relatively consistent all throughout, and while there's definitely a leap in difficulty once you reach the upper echelon of a division, it never feels unfair. It also helps that you can set your difficulty level right from the start and change it as you see fit, and you can choose whether you want to retry a fight or accept the consequences of a loss and continue on. So here's some good news. UFC 4 removes the sleazy microtransaction-driven Ultimate Team mode, and even though it doesn't replace it with anything nearly as substantial, there are at least a couple of fun new stages that are refreshingly different. There's a new backyard arena that feels especially fitting for cover athlete Jorge Masvidal, along with a very Bloodsport-inspired Kumite arena. There's also a new Blitz mode that features a rotating rule set that changes every few hours, which is a fun idea and a nice distraction from the more hardcore online modes. And they got Daniel Cormier to replace Joe Rogan on commentary.
John, don't you come to me without a combo. I want the whole platter. Give him the whole platter, young man. Put some punches together.
Lastly, while UFC 4 still looks pretty good, it's a little disappointing to see that so little has changed in the last 6 years. While there are a few new animations added into the mix, these are largely the same takedowns, slams, and strikes that we've seen before. There's a little bit more face deformation, but knockouts are still lacking a certain magic that the Fight Night series captured a console generation ago. EA Sports UFC 4 is a largely iterative sequel that tightens up some looser parts, makes a few smart tweaks here and there, and doesn't rock the boat all too much. The new submission system is a big improvement over prior years, and there are great changes to career mode that make it much more fun to mold a fighter that suits your own playstyle. The new grapple assist system is a great tool to help complete newcomers not feel lost if they get taken down, and as a whole, the fighting system remains incredibly deep. Long-standing problems still remain in the ground game and some dated visuals, but without any competition for the title, EA Sports UFC 4 still remains the king of combat sports. For more UFC 4, check out our gameplay video of Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua. And for everything else, keep it here on IGN.
B&H, how can I help you?
B&H is here. From our homes to yours, as your collaborators, creative partners, and problem solvers.
What type of photography do you do?
It's actually a very good choice.
I've got a great mic that'll work perfect for that.
As always, we're here to help with all your plans, projects, inklings, and endeavors. With 47 years of creative expertise.
Oh, cool. You're setting up a live stream DJ set? Okay, I can help you with that.
So click, chat, or call us.
Sure, call back anytime.
Happy to walk you through it.
B&H, your creative partner since 1973.
I didn't say anything about not wearing a hat. That looks pretty natural.
Does HMA VPN log your data? Sorry, lumberjacks. HMA is now a no-log VPN. No private data logging here. So when we say that HMA VPN has never been more private, it's legit. For total peace of mind, download HMA VPN today.
Perhaps one of the most confusing aspects around the new Marvel's Avengers game is, what kind of game is it exactly? Like, how much of it is single player versus multiplayer? How does the game's progression work? And is it really just Destiny 2 with a Marvel skin on it? This can be rather unclear to the average person if you haven't been keeping up with developer live streams. We got early access to the game's beta, and we're finally starting to get a clear picture. And yeah, it's actually a lot like Destiny. Let's get the biggest question out of the way. Yes, the game does have a single-player campaign. As you play through the campaign, you unlock more of the game's content and features, like new mission types, heroes, and multiplayer. Hero missions are single-player only, and these are where you're going to get most of the game's story and cutscenes. In them, you are given specific heroes to play and do unique missions to continue the game's main story. In the beta, you play as Hulk and Kamala Khan, who enter a secret AIM facility in search of Jarvis. The campaign is a purely single-player experience, and, at least in the beta, the missions are not repeatable. After the completion of a few hero missions in the beta, you go to the Chimera, an Avengers helicarrier and the game's social space. Early on, the Chimera is mostly abandoned, with only Bruce and Kamala there, and the rest is all locked off. Presumably, the Chimera will fill up with more characters and functions as you progress through the game's story. It's essentially the hub where you'll go between missions. Which leads us to the most important part of the Chimera, the War Table, which is how you pick your next objective and access the multiplayer. The War Table is broken up by environmental zones that populate with different mission types. The largest of these missions are called War Zones. These are multi-objective missions where you move across several locations. For example, this war zone in the Pacific Northwest starts you out in an open forest before eventually leading you into a small underground AIM facility. The missions are fairly straightforward, but there are small opportunities to deviate off the main path to find chests, beat up tough enemies, or break into depots for bonus loot. Where war zones are meant to be longer, more involved missions, for those looking for something quick, you have drop zones. These are bite-sized versions of war zones with only a single objective, and they take around 5 to 10 minutes to complete. War zones and drop zones are meant to be repeatable with multiple difficulties. You start to see a lot of repeating environments and objective types, so don't expect these to be as handcrafted as the campaign missions. That said, you will get some more unique war zones, such as Condition Green, where you're recommended, but not required, to play as the Hulk, or ones with a boss fight at the end. There's one more mission type in the beta, and those are the Harm missions. These take place in a combat simulation room aboard the Chimera and are wave-based combat challenges. War zones, drop zones, and Harm missions are all multiplayer focused, with options to matchmake or invite your friends. However, you can play everything single player if you want, bringing AI companions with you instead. These AI will use the gear and skills you've acquired for them, so if you decide to play purely single player, you're going to want to maintain levels of multiple heroes. There are 3 progression systems for every hero: character level, power level, and challenge card. Character levels are the most straightforward, as their purpose is to provide you with a new skill point for each level. You then use these skill points to unlock a new skill. Power level is an indicator of your stats. Every piece of gear has a power level on it, and the average of all of them is your power level. If you've played Destiny, then it's exactly like that game's power system. Gear can also be boosted, and with each boost it increases the power level of that gear. Doing so requires using one of the game's several resources, and which resource it is depends on the gear. Uncommon gear can be boosted 3 times, rare gear 5 times, and epic and legendary gear 10 times. Equipment like epic gear will have multiple perks on them, but you'll need to boost it in order to unlock the perks. Last are challenge cards, which are basically battle passes. They go all the way up to level 40, and each level unlocks cosmetics like outfits, nameplates, and emotes, or some extra resources. You earn points towards your challenge card by completing daily and weekly challenges. The challenge cards in the beta don't offer any sort of paid option, with everything being labeled as free, but there is an empty space for what is likely a paid track. And yes, every hero has their own individual challenge card. Based on our time with the beta, this appears to be the core loop of Marvel's Avengers. You have a single-player campaign intermixed with repeatable multiplayer missions, with the Chimera acting as your hub. The progression system seems designed to keep you playing long after the story is finished, but until we get our hands on the full release, it's hard to say what Avengers Endgame will look like. If you don't have access to the beta and want to know how it actually felt to play the darn thing, well, go check out our impressions video with Jordan, Phil, and myself. And for more on Avengers, stay tuned to GameSpot.
I have serious problems with Marvel's Avengers. No, not the movies or the comics, but the upcoming co-op brawler from Crystal Dynamics published by Square Enix. Now, I've tried to put on a brave face for this one. I watched on in confusion as the game was revealed last year at E3, only to highlight first and foremost that the game would be a live service with years of content funded by cosmetic microtransactions. This was also the first moment that we learned that PlayStation owners would get exclusive content, but we wouldn't learn more about that for quite some time yet. Curiously, the developers chose to show off only a very specific section of scripted gameplay during that reveal, and people were immediately cautious, like, why weren't they showing us? What were they hiding? I actually went behind the scenes with the developers to a gameplay showcase and saw actual gameplay, and it was cool. It was the gameplay you're seeing here now, just the first mission where everything's sort of going to shit and the Golden Gate Bridge is collapsing and you're switching between the whole squad, and it was very cool stuff. Later on at PAX Australia, I played this game, playing through the first mission and one of the combat simulations, and I liked it. It was a basic brawler with really high production values. Immediately, I could tell that there was a lot more sizzle than there was sausage, but I was okay with that. For a long time now, I've said that I expect this to be a fun 20-hour game that I play through and put down and probably never think about ever again. I no longer hold that view. I spent about 8 hours playing through the PS4 version of this game, and I'm here to tell you that this thing is going in all the wrong directions at once. Technically, narratively, the combat, the mission design, the weird loot game, and the really disappointing focus on monetization right the way through, the Avengers beta just left me feeling so cold. I've not felt a chill like this since Ghost Recon Breakpoint, and before that, Anthem. And even then, I enjoyed Anthem's beta a lot more than I enjoyed this. I played the Avengers on a PS4 Pro since the beta was exclusive to PS4 pre-order customers this weekend. Can I just start by saying that's a really shitty thing to do, and that betas shouldn't be used as a pre-order incentive, and they especially shouldn't be platform exclusives. Anyway, moving on. So, I played it on PS4 Pro, where performance can really only be described as terrible. The game offers two modes, 4K, which prioritizes resolution, and a performance mode, which prioritizes frame rate. I spent most of the time playing on the performance mode, and from what I can tell, frame rate is uncapped, and in its absolute best moments, it can reach around about 60 frames a second. These best moments are about as rare as hen's teeth though. We're talking about the VR training room before any enemies spawn, the elevator loading sequences when there's nothing going on, walking around the Avengers HQ when there's no enemies there. Basically, when the game stops being a game and just sort of becomes a kind of interactive loading sequence or a cutscene, it can hit 60 FPS. Otherwise, it's the least reliable 30 FPS I've seen in a long time. Pretty much anything will trigger massive frame drops here. Enemies spawning, particle effects, destructible environments, moving the camera too fast, all of it just tanks the frame rate immediately. It's honestly so bad that it manifestly impacts actual gameplay. The whole thing feels so clunky and unresponsive for a variety of reasons, but one of those reasons is that the FPS is just struggling to keep up with your inputs or with whatever's going on screen. This was already bad, but I forced myself to switch over to the 4K mode because, you know, I had to test it, and man, I don't want to say this is unplayable, but it's basically unplayable.
There's no... Look at that! Oh my god!
See? Look at this game!
So how's your night? Yeah, good. I need to go to bed. I'm really fucking drunk.
On the 4K setting, not only are you getting massive frame drops on the reg, but you're also getting the most egregious motion blur I think I've ever seen in a AAA game. It makes me feel sick at times, and that's not something I ever experienced before. I got motion sick playing the Avengers, and you can't even turn the motion blur off because there's no option for it. The other thing that contributes to this disorienting feeling you get when playing this game is the screen shake. The screen is shaking all the damn time. I get that they want me to feel the earth-shattering might of the Hulk when he slams down on his foes, and I get they want me to drink deep the boom crash opera that are these destructible environments, but there's just so much goddamn screen shake that it's hard to stay focused on what's actually happening on the screen. And yes, once again, you cannot disable it or even adjust it, you are just stuck with it. Online networking is really broken at this point. Basically, I only successfully match-made with people a handful of times. The rest I would try and join games and it would either just hang on the menu,